Hello, my name is Shannon Bodilli, and I will be talking about Latin American art in this presentation. And in art, many artists contribute and reflect on their culture across the practices of painting, architecture, literature, and music. And among these artists, we're going to talk about the Latin American artist Diego Rivera, who was a painter and muralist, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who was an author, and Celia Cruz, who was a singer. And all three of these artists excelled in their fields. They were leaders and connected with Latin Americans, as well as provided with the message that although they had national struggles, whichever country that was in, or wherever they were, there was hope and unity, and they could be together. They always promoted this value, this main theme, in whatever they did. First, we're going to talk about Diego Rivera, and you can just see some of his works and a picture of him on this slide. And Diego Rivera was born in Guanajuato, Mexico in 1886. He spent his early career studying in Europe, and traveling, practicing painting and learning, which was pretty common at that time. He returned to Mexico after the Mexican Revolution, which ended in 1917, and he was commissioned by the Mexican government to paint a series of murals which would speak to the public, which was mostly illiterate, to speak to that public about just rebuilding after the Mexican Revolution. They were kind of like just ways to unify the country after the Mexican Revolution, which was such a period of struggle for Mexico. So his early murals were really some of the things that helped him portray that message of hope and unity for Latin America and for Rivera also believed in creating kind of a utopia for the future. And art was his platform for his political beliefs as well. And his career actually suffered a little bit because especially in the United States, because he was affiliated with the Communist Party. And obviously that didn't mesh well with the US, but in that way his art extended to other areas that weren't just painting. They all had messages. It was something that he felt very strongly about. So we're going to analyze the mural that he did in the Palacio Nacional in 1931. It was part of the murals that he was commissioned by the government to create. And you can see it's very big. It's like an entire staircase. And I also added just a clearer picture in the center because the bigger picture wasn't super clear. So there's small aspects of this piece that kind of like a lot of small aspects that all come into one. I want to go back to this main slide so you can see all of the colors that he uses are very vibrant. The motion at the bottom of the painting where there's war going on, it gives it life. Like what's happening in this painting is the scene that's happening in all of Mexico at the present time. Or like history is also coming to life. So one of the smaller parts is slavery. You could see there's slaves drawn on the painting. The Mexican Revolution is an aspect, and that was a very, very common theme in the government commissioned artworks because it was right after the Mexican Revolution. You can see the banner they're holding that says Tierra y Libertad, land and freedom, which was one of the main causes of the revolution. And also hits on the indigenous past of Mexico, and this was a theme that Rivera really, really liked. And then I'd like to note, which really draws my attention, is that eagle in the very center, which is way bigger than the people. It is definitely the main focus of this painting. So, and this eagle really ties everything together in the message of unity and hope, because it's an eagle in the center, and that eagle is the eagle on the Mexican flag. You can see it on the cactus holding the snake in its mouth, and it's because of the size, it's like saying that Mexico as a whole, us as a whole, Latin America as a whole, is so much bigger than all these things going on, and we're all together, we're all united, even though we have these struggles. And personally, I really like Rivera's style. I think it's beautiful, it's intricate. You could spend so long looking at them, and I really like how it looks like it's just coming to life, even though it's just on a wall. The next artist we're going to talk about is Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and he was known for his literature. And there's also just two paintings on this slide because they are kind of a representation that you can see of magic realism. Magic realism was the style that Marquez was known for in his literature because it displays the fantastical in an everyday scene. Like you would just expect to see something extraordinary and wouldn't react to it, and it's a really big deal. So Marquez is a Colombian author. He was born in 1927, and he really connected, he also really connected with the Latin American people. He wrote about the reality of Latin America. It's kind of a phrase that's known to connect with Marquez. He said he just wrote about what he knew best, and that was those people. His works earned him a Nobel Prize in 1982, and he gave a powerful speech that really summarizes his career as a whole. But he said that it's his job as kind of a storyteller to create a message of a better day for Latin Americans. This is a quote where love and love will prove true and happiness be possible. And so Marquez also stated that, like Diego Rivera, he couldn't remove his theology or his political beliefs from his literature. So in that way, he's also connecting to politics and a world platform by his art that he was creating. And now we're going to, and this is just a photo of him receiving the Nobel Peace Prize, and just a quote from him where no one will be able to decide for others how they die. Love will prove true and happiness be possible. And then Big Mama's Funeral is a short story written by Marquez about hacienda, or the owner of an hacienda, who was pretty much just old money and had so much more power than she needed. And it's about this woman's death. It was kind of the end of an era. It was written in 1962, and this is just an image of an hacienda, so we can see, because we don't really have these in the Midwest. But it just showed the state of Latin America, how there were super rich people and also super poor people. And the poor were really beaten down by the rich. And so this message it just ends with a message of hope for a better day. We don't have time to read the whole thing, but the short story starts with introducing Big Mama as an amazing, cared-for woman. In point number 1, it says that her funeral was attended by the Pope. So as the reader thinks that, wow, who is this important person? And then the second part of it starts to change a little bit. We learn about the grandeur of Big Mama, but it kind of turns to sarcasm. It talks about how, in that second line, that she was the center of gravity and that the town was founded on her name. Nobody knew really how much exactly she owned, where the limits were, but it states that no one knew if she was in charge of the rain and the drought, which is starting to show there's a lot of sarcasm going on here. And then this is just an image I found of Big Mama being portrayed as the hacienda owner on top and all the more common people at the bottom. And she's in her rocker living life perfectly, and everyone else is suffering, which connects to the third part of it, where the tone starts to shift to sarcastic and mocking, because Big Mama she's giving a list of her possessions, and then starts to say that she owns all these things that are unownable, like the wealth of the subsoil, the territorial waters, the colors of the flag, national sovereignty. Everybody knows that this is impossible, but it's also part of the magic realism, where Big Mama is just this amazing person who basically owns the entire country, and that's normal. It's stated in a normal way, with periods, and there's not even exclamation points. It's just very, very simple. simply stated. And then the short story ends with an idea of hope for the people who were influenced by Big Mama. It says that they had to mourn her death, but there was also a sigh of relief. And relief comes when you know that the suffering is over. And I think that Marquez was also saying that by getting rid of these hacienda owners, the suffering would be done, and things did have to change, and they were changing at the time. Personally, I liked Big Mama and Marquez's style. I thought it was a little bit boring, especially when I didn't understand that it was sarcasm and the aspects of magic realism, but once I did see that, it was really interesting because there's so many layers of the story that you could get into. Finally, we are going to talk about Celia Cruz, the Queen of Salsa. And she was born in 1924 in Cuba to a poor family. She worked as a salsa singer from a young age to support her family and left Cuba when she was young because she was touring. And then because of Fidel Castro coming into power, she was unable to return. And this was just a YouTube video of one of her famous performances, but we don't really have time to watch that. And just during her life, she connected to many African Cubans because she was in exile from her country, and there were many Cubans who were in exile from theirs. This is a picture of her funeral, which shows how loved and how supported she was, especially by Cubans and Latin Americans, because they were all living this new life in America, missing their homelands. But she also gave them ideas of hope and kind of peace and joy in remembering how their homeland was. And then I like the second quote that says, "She triumphed despite having faced many barriers in her time. She was poor, black, a woman, and an exile, a writer she overcame it all." And that's really the message that all three of these artists have portrayed, that you can overcome despite these difficulties. And then this is the song, Cuando Salí de Cuba, and it talks about how she left Cuba. And we'll just give this a quick listen. And I couldn't find a video of the actual performance. Alright, so you kind of heard her style. But it talks about when she left Cuba, she left her life, she left her love, she buried her heart. And it talks a little bit later about the green fields, or the green countrysides, and the clear water of the beaches in Cuba. And I've included 2 pictures of that so we can actually see. And that's how she connected with so many Cubans who were missing their homelands, or who had never even been to their homeland because their parents were immigrants to America. And this is just a perfect example of seeing the good despite the bad. Forgiving is not forgetting. Forgiving is remembering without pain. I think an interesting point of this song is that she usually uses a lot faster pace, the congos, and a lot of different drum styles to show happiness and a celebration. She said frequently that life is a celebration, but for this one it's a lot more toned down, and you can really hear in the lyrics her voice, her passion, her pain, and her longing to go back to Cuba, which really connects with a lot of Cuban Americans. And just to conclude, Celia Cruz, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and Diego Rivera were all artists who connected with Latin Americans, and they portrayed this idea of hope and unity despite national problems in all the works that they did. They touched many people's lives and influenced them greatly as well.